content, meaningful content, meaningful content, content.
Do you want to A, B, in?
Oh, like maybe he should be in the unicorn chair?
Well,
that's possible.
Can't see the unicorn anyway. I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, we got to get the unicorn.
We got a unicorn shot here. We got a unicorn shot there. Okay. Does that... I feel like that's a little better because you're in the limelight there. And that just seems a little bit more like the host's chair to me because you're closer to the camera. And I'm wearing these light clothes that stand out against the background, whereas you got the dark clothes. What do you think?
You are the one with a BA and the dramatic. Are you from the dramatic arts department?
That's true. Yeah. I was a BFA major at UCSB. Yeah.
You would, you know.
So I learned to banter and kind of where I learned to improvise.
You're a trained professional when it comes to...
I'm a trained thespian.
A trained thespian.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this movie? It's really worth watching. The Unbearable Weight of a Massive Talent.
I did see that with Nick Cage. I did. You know, that was the last movie I saw in the theater.
What was the phrase that he kept saying about his shamanic thespian? He's like...
I was pretty stoned.
Yeah, but that whatever he was referring to as he's like, let me use my my shamanic thespian. They were just like, thought it was the best, you know.
That was a funny movie.
Yeah, I liked it.
I'm not the biggest Nick Cage fan, but him kind of playing himself and making fun of himself, I thought was great. It was like the ego was put up on the cross.
Oh my God, that whole like making out with himself.
Oh, I know, my God.
Yeah.
That was hilarious.
Making out with his ego as just a thing.
Amen.
I'm not sure how it'll be. I mean, this first one. I did bring lab coats too, if it felt like this was more of an experiment, and we weren't sure that if you wear lab coats, you can present things as an experiment.
Oh, okay, right, naturally.
The silent cocktail party. It was true, but the ability to cut across the lines of taste and privacy is a rare thing. Not all of us have it, and not all of those who have it can avoid giving offense. I wonder too. I don't know what this is about. I don't know what this... You are what you feel. Perhaps it is the knowledge of this linking of posture to emotion that makes an army direct its soldiers to stand straight and stiff. The hope is that eventually they will become immovable and determined. Certainly the cliche of the old soldier with the ramrod up his back and a rigid personality to go with it has some truth. How to break out of a shell. How do you break out of your shell? How do you reach out to others? The first step is breaking free must be understanding that shell, understanding the defenses you have set up. Recently at a counselor training center at New York University, I was shown a number of videotapes of interviews between counselors who were learning the counseling technique and troubled children who were being counseled. In one tape, a pleasant-featured, well-dressed white woman who reeked of gentility was interviewing a disturbed and extremely introverted black girl of 14. The girl sat at a table with her head down, her face hidden from the woman, her left hand further covering her eyes and her right hand stretched across the tabletop. As the interview progressed, the girl's left hand still shielded her eyes. She would not look up, though she was quite articulate, but her right hand stole out across the tabletop toward the counselor, the fingers walking the hand along, retreating, then advancing, cajoling and inviting, crying with an almost audible shriek of body language. Touch me, for heaven's sake, touch me. Take my hand and force me to look at you. Interesting.
Poetic.
Yeah, Julius Fast.
Julius.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You know, there was some talk.
Do you want to keep that with you? It's buzzing.
Yeah, it sure is, man. Show me what you do.
Yeah.
David.
So one of the most important things I learned in the theater days of UCSB was the voice for the stage classes. Our teacher Michael Morgan taught us basically yoga with voice exercises, and one of the most powerful things was a forward fold while you're vocalizing. So I've kind of created my own thing where I inhale, take the arms up, interlace the fingers, and you press the palms up to the sky, and that opens up the whole body and the spine and the ribcage. And then as you exhale, I do a and then you stay in the forward fold, and you do another om, and this time you bounce your knees and let your head and neck relax and bobble. And now do it again, and this time open your lips and doing like a ma, ma, ma sound. So one more time. And then lastly, he would have us vocalize as we roll up the spine and hold the hum until the very top. Ready? Rolling up the spine. Doesn't get any weirder than that.
Oh, it's good. It's good. I'd do another round.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. So wait.
Deep breath in, extend the arms up. This part's huge. Just open up the chest, the rib cage, and then exhale. And now bounce the knees on the next om. And you can inhale, come halfway up if you want, gaze forward like a yoga pose, straighten the spine, and then exhale, fold. Let's do that one more time. Inhale, come halfway up, totally straighten the spine, big open heart, exhale, fold. And then you can inhale, roll up the spine, one vertebra at a time. If you want, yeah, keep the head and neck at the top. And then, there's always the old side stretchies, which is just so good for the rib cage. Like opening up. Talk about the accordion, right? The body's an accordion, right? So, oh man, it's good. It's good stuff.
Content, meaningful content. 3 or 4.
I can't even imagine, man.
I know, it doesn't even feel like it was me.
But it's so cool because it's like it's made you who you are. I think when you have kids that young, it's like that's a spiritual initiation. Your kids are your guru.
Yeah, totally.
They're your teacher.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
And you had to be.
Yeah, and I don't think I totally knew. I mean, I think there was some part of me that's like, oh, this is going to be really good for songwriting.
Right.
Not that I was, but I was already kind of down the like art, artist rabbit hole.
Yeah.
A bit. I mean, pretty far down it. I was definitely like music centric, but I remember this songwriter I liked a lot, Greg Brown. Do you know Greg Brown?
I don't know Greg Brown.
He's great, kind of folk singer that kind of, he's got it. He still does stuff. But he, kind of had a couple, he had an independent label, I think called Red House Records, that he put out a ton of CDs on his own label, and as well as other artists, and kind of did the Kate Wolf Folk Festival, and was pretty, well known in like the independent folk world.
Nice.
I saw him at Coombois Jazz Center once, and I saw him in Santa Cruz, and I saw him in like a church in Berkeley, and he would just, and he was, but there's in particular, there's this live album of his called, I think, A Live One, and the songs are great, and I heard one song on there, and he's really funny. Like he's noticeably funny. He's kind of like he's got this real kind of bare voice, like almost Tom Waitsy, and he definitely has like his storytelling is like spot on and long. He goes on like long tales about his grandma and like sort of interspersed with the music. And and he talks about his kids. He was like one of the first people I was like, oh, he's singing about his kids right now. It's like really personal in a direct way. And I remember thinking like, well, that's cool. And I was like, maybe I'd get some of that, like at the point
was that when you were you a dad when you
no, it was as it was starting to happen, and but I definitely had like, and I don't know, I mean, I'm like, as a songwriter, I had the thing early on, like the first songs I wrote in high school were sort of like well, I really liked Billy Joel, so they were attempts to write Billy Joel songs, and even, I mean, it's interesting, the keyboard that we have today, between the Rhodes piano and that Casio SK1, like those two sounds were on like all my high school demos.
Oh, really?
Because I had they were what I had, and like my 4-track, and I was always trying to write these. I even remember like, I like this Billy Joel song called, the night is still young, and I was like,
Yeah.
what if I lifted? I mean, I didn't think I was like lifting, but
Right.
but I also hadn't, I was like in high school, so I hadn't actually had much of an experience of life at all, except I lived in the suburbs, and I didn't totally think like my life had been valid because there hadn't been any real struggle of any kind, and
Right.
I was just a white kid from the suburbs, you know, like. And then, I could like look back now and be like, oh, well, that was maybe traumatizing, or different things happened to you in a life, but
Sure.
at the time I certainly didn't feel like, like Vincent van Gogh.
Sure.
Like, and so I remember those first songs I wrote were like trying to be like these other songs. And I remember people liking them, because they sounded like songs that existed, and I was just 15 or 16, but I remember feeling like a fraud, but still doing them, and sort of just because like that's what was happening.
Sure.
And it wasn't till like later in college, it took a while before authentic voices started to come out for me.
Yeah.
And like looking back on those songs now, I actually kind of appreciate some of them, but but they felt very inauthentic,
Yeah.
and not based on any experience that I'd ever had.
Of course, I totally relate to that. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's kind of how, I think that's how the creative journey begins. It's like, in a sense, nothing is original in its beginnings, right? It's like we all come out of the egg, but it's then in the formation of interchange with the elements of life and the ups and downs and
absolutely
that then anything unique, I guess, or varied comes into fruition.
I'm pulling up this book because
we're all blank canvases.
We are, and I literally read this, like the idea that your God, I'm trying to find the quote in here, but anyway, the
Paraphrase
idea,
it.
or like originality,
Yeah.
has to do with something being born.
Right.
As you're saying,
Right.
but yet already, because I think when we're talking about the creative process, we're talking about kind of what you and I were discussing earlier, that there's two voices constantly intertwined. There's the muse and the editor.
Right.
The muse is like, woo, and the editor's like, actually, let's move this over here. And ideally, they're working in tandem.
Right.
But sometimes, and I think especially when you're a child, creativity just comes naturally.
Exactly.
But I think by the time you're 3, the voices of the editors and the judges are already so strong that you're already trying to be like, oh, here's a song I wrote. Like, how does this fit into this thing? And I think it's almost like survival to a certain extent, where you're like, oh, like, you sort of applaud those when I think about like Prince or something, where you're like, man, that guy came on like to have that kind of chutzpah, like at age 15 or whatever. He's just like, I am Prince. And but there must have been some moment in between where he's just like an awkward 12-year-old, like, or maybe not, or maybe his inner voice was just so strong that it was not going to be stifled by,
Yeah, it makes me think about like what the soul that we come into this life with. You think of the Princes or like a Freddie Mercury, or even like a John Lennon. They were kind of larger than life. I think even from an early age. But yeah, it's like still that diamond in the rough element. Like there's something within each of us, and then life is what happens that kind of roughs that just grinds down the shell, the outer layer, the veil to reveal what's inside, and that only comes with time and experience.
Well, and this goes another full circle, because we're I sometimes think that like this unicorn. Part of what the unicorn, the reason the unicorn is here.
Yeah. Why is the unicorn here?
The unicorn is here because, well, it was almost my birthday. I walked through the it's not Amazing Grace, the Destined for Grace thrift store. Dropped some stuff off. Saw this unicorn in the window, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, Jessica, I think I know what I want for my birthday. You know, people are always asking you what you want for your birthday. And I was
Yeah.
like, I think I don't really want, I was like, I want this unicorn, but I don't really want it because this is like ridiculous for a 48-year-old man to be asking his wife for a unicorn. And it was like, it's big and it's like, where are you going to put it? And like, and all the, the child in me was like, I want the unicorn in the window. And the adult in me, the editor was like, well, no, where's this unicorn going to go and all this stuff. And so I kept going back to the window to look at this unicorn. I brought a couple friends and we were like, what do you think about this? Is this valid art? It's 100 years old. It said like, it was like pretty.
Was it really that old?
Yeah, it's an old unicorn. And then as I kept going back to examine it. And at first I was just sort of taken by the whole thing. And then soon I was like, oh, wait a second. It's been over time, it's been altered in all sorts of ways. It's been patched, in fact, added sparkles, and in fact, I'm not sure I'm not sure it originated as a unicorn. It may have been a horse of some kind, and over time, and through the helping hands of many people, it grew into a unicorn. And I sort of was like, subconsciously, I think I was feeling all those things, and my wife, rallied some friends to sort of pitch in to get me this unicorn, and with a quote from the Velveteen Rabbit that was sort of like, it takes a long time to become real. It takes a long, and in the course of it, you're going to be beat up, and all this stuff's going to happen to you, and a lot of people will see you as ugly. A lot of people won't totally believe, even, they'll be like, unicorns aren't real, it's a fake, but a lot of people will see the unicorn. And so for me, that's kind of what this endeavor feels like it's all about.
That's beautiful. I think that's a great analogy of our lives, man. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of a love story. It's like this. It seems to me this unicorn belonged to you. You were meant to.
Well, if we're playing that kind of, if it's that kind of world, then we were in the story. Yes, we were.
You saw yourself in this unicorn. That's what I'm. Seeing.
That's another way of thinking of it.
Yeah. But I like what you said about from the Velveteen Rabbit. It takes a long time to become real.
Yeah,
and that's such a paradox because, almost from like a Taoist perspective, we are who we are. We came into this world pure. I feel that we came into this world as our authentic self, and then what happens is we grow up, we get our education, we get our programming, and we in a sense maybe lose sight or forget the essence of who we are, and then we have to go through this whole journey of rediscovering, remembering our realness, our authenticity. And that only comes I can only speak personally, but that only comes from breaking down, things falling apart that I thought were real, aspects of the little self that I thought were the true self, taking me for a ride. And it's like
layer upon layer.
Yeah. You begin to realize who you are by learning who you are not,
Yeah. I do. It makes me think, and I don't totally know how it all works, but I think we're on the same page with it, where like it does seem like with a child, they're plugged in, but it seems like quickly the sort of what I'm going to call the judge, because that sort of is like the critic, but it's like the voice of our parents. It's the voice of society. It's
voice
the voice
of reason.
Voice of reason. It is, whimsical idea. That's crazy. This is crazy. So, and how's this going to fit in? Because I think on the flip side of it, we all know what it's like to be bullied. I hope we've experienced that. We know what it's like to feel like you don't fit in. We know what it's like to suppress thoughts that we think don't have a place in the society, because society has relatively narrow lanes, and I think at the same time as society, as our society is birthing new identities, new things that we can be, new possibilities, and like that's the role. I mean, another reason that was driving this show is that I feel like the job of artists, and it's sort of often whittled down, in college, it's like it's not, the arts are not like a money-making endeavor to begin a life where you're like, my goal is to become an authentic version of the person I'm meant to be, is not often not necessarily aligned with capitalism.
Right. It's not something we're taught.
It's not something we're taught. But
in fact, the opposite is
the opposite. And so the reason being because it is a life where, how are you going to live and how are you going to pay for these things? Even though a lot of those things are all traps.
Yeah. It's the unknown. It's a life that is the unknown, essentially. Yeah.
As opposed to paving your own path.
Right.
It's nice to at least have some in a world that's constantly shifting, because that is the truth of life, right? Change, nothing is even, we're new people than we were 10 minutes ago.
Exactly, yeah.
You see that do something reliable, go to become a doctor, at least there's a path here. And if you follow this path, you can achieve some sort of stability in life. And that is real.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that's the fearful voice that comes in. And maybe though, if there's other voices that are supportive, I know I was pretty lucky to, have a semblance of a career in the arts, if I can say that.
Sure.
But certainly at first it was sort of a joke. I think I approached it like I want to be a rock star, but like I was kind of serious, but with a wink and a nod, and then I think as I got closer to adulthood, I was like, oh, maybe I could be a musician. Like, is that a possibility? And my dad sort of had been that, and maybe he could. And then certainly I had a lot of help along the way from friends and teachers and parental and my brother and just people who were supportive of that as an endeavor. Like, people definitely questioned it as a path, but nobody ever said like, you're crazy,
Yeah.
They were like, what's your fallback? They were like trying to caution me against,
it sounds like they saw the artist in you, like the creator in you. Because I think my feeling is that those of us who are inclined towards that path, it's almost like I feel like we come into this world with that fire, with that a burning curiosity.
It's a question. I think for me, the origin, again,
mystery.
Coming back to originality,
right?
I quote, what did my dad and I had a great conversation yesterday, and I'll quote my dad's quote because it was awesome. He said, and we were talking about, my dad's an artist.
Yeah.
And we were talking about whether my dad is the kind of artist who, again, was always creative as a child. His mom was his mom was an artist, a painter, musician.
Nice.
And my dad definitely, was involved with music in like the early 50s, was like, oh, maybe I'm going to be like, some kind of musician in this world, but also was always crafty and then, kind of did bands in college and took it pretty far and folk music but always painted. And then I think, the idea of that as a life scared him. How would he support a family? He always knew he wanted to have kids and all that stuff went into it. And so he, also wanted to be a businessman. So he kind of favored that and figured out a way to make money, and he did well with that. But he was always coming home from work, diving into whatever he was into, be it classical guitar or painting or graphic design or writing. He would just go head on, and would work until late into the night, just, whatever he was excited about, and now all he does is paint.
Oh, wow.
And, and there's some sort of, as he's approaching 80, there's some sort of like, we were talking, it's like, are you an artist, And he's like, well, I feel like I've always been an artist, but I sometimes tell people I'm an artist, and my mom's like, you're not an artist, tell him what, because there is this sort of like societal thing that like, you're not an artist unless you've sold your painting for enough paintings there's some sort of weird gray area,
It's so true.
And what is that line, and where do you, but on some level,
what
maybe
society defines as an art, you have
is that true? It feels like it.
Well, yeah, I was having a conversation with someone else, this very similar thing, and I really believe that you don't have to be a quote unquote professional to be an artist. Like I ask people this all the time, like, do you like to sing? Because I hear people talking about singing and how much joy it brings people to just sing in the car or to sing in the shower. And they go, oh, I love to sing, but I'm not a singer. And I go, well, what does that even mean? Yes, you are. If you sing, you are a singer. You love to sing.
Right.
And so why the critic comes in and goes, oh, I play guitar, but I'm not very well. I'm bad. I'm terrible. I'm like, so what? Do you derive joy from it? Does it bring meaning to your life? Is it a form of release and catharsis? If it is, then own that for a moment.
Yeah.
Even if it's,
if it's yours.
Yeah.
Is it your identity? And I think it is. I think in a lot of cases, there's, a lot of people who are like, I play guitar. Like, it's my favorite thing to do in the world. But I'm not a guitarist. I'm, an IT guy or I'm this other thing. And I think, but really, maybe you are a guitarist, maybe that, maybe it's up to us to identify with what we want to be. And it's a choice.
That brings up a really powerful and interesting point, which is that I believe that our words are really powerful, what we say to ourselves and what we say to others. And so, like, it might be okay to say, well, I'm not a guitarist by trade, but I do play guitar. I love playing guitar, so I am a guitarist,
Right.
And so, because we've been programmed. We know this that from an early age. We've been programmed the way that we speak, the way that we talk, behave, act. And so we can reprogram ourselves to empower ourselves to do the things that we love, and to live a life that's fulfilling for us.
Yeah, amen.
I don't know. Yeah, I get excited about these things because
no. Well, I mean, it's it's the mystery of life. I remember. The quote from my dad as we were talking about. Well, and I bring it up because as this, even whatever this thing is we're doing, right. I've been a musician for a while, and so now I'm trying on some other hats, that feel like they could fit me. And I'm someone who loves different hats and different costumes. And,
you're a thespian in your own right.
I am.
Yeah, you.
With you're like there's other voices that are like, oh no, I'm not.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to become the version of myself that I can be most proud of, and I feel like the arts or claiming that or blossoming enough to allow that to be something that society can bestow upon me, like the wizard giving the cowardly lion his courage badge, even though he had the courage all along. Yeah. And I feel like even for my father's sake, as I, because he's turning 80 this year and he's going to do his 80th birthday, but also an art show for the first time, cool. And so I'm sort of encouraging that.
Nice.
And, anyway, the quote was, our meanderings are like waves. Every wave is different, yet it keeps repeating itself, cause and effect, like each breath. And he was like, I called him yesterday, we were FaceTiming, and he was like lying in bed. And that's and we just meandered about the arts, but it made me think that we're like in these orbits, where we come back to the same place. You and I known each other. We haven't talked in a while. Here we are orbiting again, at this little satellite, and then our time together will pass.
Right.
And each time you connect, it's a similar thing, but it's also a different thing. It's a new thing. And I kind of feel like our becoming is like that too. This process of creation and destruction,
right.
And even the ego or the judge, whatever we want to call it, as a means of sort of like, here's a bright idea, and then the ego comes and maybe is like, could destroy that idea, or could soften that idea, or could help transmute that idea, or could even, deepen that idea, because and I'm not sure how this works exactly, but it's like I feel like the mechanism of this ego judge that's also the voice of society.
Right.
I feel like its job, the hope is that it's protecting us.
Sure.
But like a nervous system that's gone awry, and like like you've been like a dog who's like afraid of feet because they were kicked once, and every time they see a foot, and this foot's a kind foot, but they just jump because, and I think that happens to our nervous systems all the time. And I think it probably happens to our creative urges all the time. They get booted enough or censored enough, then you say, I'm not an artist, I'm not this. But I do think you're right. I kind of think, and it's a bit of a claim, but it does feel like creativity and art might be the natural state of all children and all people.
Yes.
And maybe it is something that, maybe it is unique to each human soul, and each human soul as it goes through its, I'm not sure how it works as far as like a reincarnation, or whether souls get recycled, or whether they merge together. I don't know that.
Right.
But it does seem like there's this birth process, and
Yes.
and something is, each thing is original, although it's one of many.
Yes. Yes.
It's just another human baby every day.
Yeah.
One was born just now as I was speaking, but they're all special and sacred. But they're one of a kind.
Absolutely. We live in what you're saying brings to my mind. We live in a creative world. The universe is creative, right? You look at planet Earth. It's creative. The way that the mountains are formed where we lived, and the ocean, and each bay is different.
Yeah.
And so I really believe and feel in my heart of hearts that we are that creative spirit too. We have it within us, and I think a big part of this human journey, and again, I'm speaking personally here, but I know it relates to everybody, is to discover the creative spirit or the creative presence within ourselves, and to in a sense kind of align with it, to come to know it, because I feel like that's a big part of coming to understand who we are and what power we have. What is power? And
what is power?
What is our relationship to it? To me, a big part of that is learning how to express. Create and express. To me, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And that's the thing about children. Again, like why I find them so inspiring and I love being around them is they're expressive. Generally speaking, I was playing a gig the other day, and this 8-year-old girl drew me a picture of the guitar with a $5 bill, and she wrote underneath it, "You're the best," and she gave it, and it meant the world to me. It almost brought tears to my eyes. I'm like, this is what I live for, and to see that creative spirit coming out of a young child, because I was there sharing my creative spirit through music. Yeah. And this is how it works. We have the ability to inspire one another, to activate each other. Kind of like, I think there's a Buddhist quote, or the Buddha said, with one flame you can light 1,000 candles without losing your flame.
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah, 1,000 or more. I mean, it's really true.
Right.
And the more nuanced the approach. I mean, it's interesting to talk about these things. Like when we were conceiving of whatever this show is, the word that kept coming back was magic.
Yeah.
And even last night I was with some people, and we were just talking about. It's it's like, it's not scientific, and you don't want to fall into this sort of like pseudoscience about,
sure.
And there's plenty of, what are these mechanisms that we use to talk, spirit,
right.
soul,
right.
Originality, all these words that we use to speak to this process that we're all, for the most part, I think pretty aware of.
Yeah.
But yet it
mystery.
It still remains a mystery.
How do you exexplain the unexplainable?
Yeah, you pick some words, and and we're getting better. I mean, I think
sure. That's part of the creative process, is trying to explain or describe that which ultimately could never be, completely explained or described.
And it seems to always come back to like concepts like trust and faith.
Yeah,
and,
letting go,
and whatever that means. But.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is great.
David, tell me, it's funny, in my phone, you come up as David Courtney.
Oh, yeah, the old name.
Yeah.
I never, okay.
I don't know.
Never told you the whole story. Well, since
we're
here before the world, I might as well tell this interesting story. So, when I was a kid, I was, for the first 13 years of my life, I was a pastor's son. My dad was a minister.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was born in Northern California.
Okay.
And when I was 2, he got transferred to Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh.
So I was born as David Segall. That was my family name. Well, somewhere in the mid to late 80s, my dad's identity got stolen. And this was back in the days when, like, that was a new thing, this fraudulence of stealing someone's name and address. Somehow his name got stolen, and somebody used his identity to like open credit cards and, you know, write fraudulent checks. And the sheriff came knocking on his door, you know, several times and being like, thinking that he was this other Mark Segall. And he had to explain to them, no, this is not the same person. Finally, he had to go like to the court, the local court, to clear his name and find out, how do I get rid of this once and for all? And apparently the judge said, well, you know, you can do A, B, and C, but the best thing, the easiest thing is to actually change your name, because that'll clear you of it. And coincidentally, around this same time, thankfully, he got transferred back to California, and we were moving to the San Luis Obispo.
Okay. What kind of church was this?
It was a non-denominational Christian church. Yeah, he ended up leaving that world behind when I was about 13. He left the world of organized religion, but that was a whole journey in of itself. But anyways, when we were moving back to California, my mom was strongly, urging him, let's just change the name. And so they went back into the family history and found that Courtenay was a family name on my mom's side, somewhere in the British Irish part of the family, and said my mom and my sister loved that name, and so they decided on that name. However, I remember at the age, talk about a little bit of a trauma. At the age of 7, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I don't like that. I don't identify with that name. Right. But I went with it because I'm like 7 and you go with your family.
Yeah.
And then, so I went with it for many years, but I just remember, kids would make fun of me at school, and they wouldn't say Courtenay, they'd say Courtney, or even if they said Courtenay, like, oh, Courtenay, it's so, it sounds like very and I couldn't stand the name. And so fast forward many years, I was 7 years old, and in my early 30s, I must have been about 32 or 33, I was meditating on the beach one day here in Santa Barbara. I was getting ready to do my first tour of Europe. This was the summer of 2016 or fall of 2016. I was getting ready to go my very first European tour, and I'm meditating, and in this moment of stillness, it comes up, you are to go back to your birth-given name. And I open my eyes from the meditation, and I see a pod of bottlenose dolphins pop out of the water. And speaking of reading the signs, I've learned to do that when I have a thought or an inspiration and I see something, especially like a spirit animal appear, a hummingbird, or I listened to it, and I just thought, wow. And at this point, I had been back in Santa Barbara doing the professional music thing for 5 or 6 years, and I had kind of made a name, I had kind of made a little bit of a name for myself. And I thought, God, can I survive a rebranding? Yeah. Can I do this? But I went for it. And I explained to my friends and community. I just was open and honest, even though it was kind of an embarrassing story a little bit, but
really,
I mean, and the rest is history.
Wow. David Segall was reborn.
Yeah. Right? It was definitely a rebirth at the age of 33. Yeah. 33, 34, somewhere around there.
7 was when you became David Courtenay?
Exactly. Yeah.
So do you feel like, and it's, so I must have met you right around the end of David Courtenay.
That's right. Yeah. I think around 2014, I remember, is when you came over and you recorded some with me. And said, yeah.
So that was the end of that era.
That was the end of that era and the beginning of a new one. And it's funny because, to tie into our conversation earlier here, you were talking about it takes a long time to become real. And I look back at that journey, it's like it took a long time to come back to my roots.
Yeah.
And I remember my grandparents, my father's parents, being really disappointed and hurt that we had changed the family name. They took it really personally.
Oh, you mean from Segall?
Exactly.
No, they didn't.
They didn't understand why my dad did that, and he tried to explain to them it's not personal, but they felt like it was his way of kind of breaking away from them.
Like beef with them?
Well, a little bit for sure. But it really hurt my grandmother. She never really understood it. But they were always really, those grandparents, Grandpa Al and Grandma Shirley, they were so supportive of me. I remember in my 20s, and I was living in Chicago, telling them about how I was doing the music thing, and I was in a Beatles tribute band, and I was recording albums. And my grandfather, he'd go, "Yeah, you're gonna make it, David. I just know you're gonna make it." And he just had such conviction in his voice, and And I really praise and honor the grandparents and the ancestors. But it felt really good to go back to that family name at that age, because they had already passed on at that point.
Yeah.
But I really believe they're always with us. I really believe we're all one. And that this thing of time, even though we are experiencing it in this game of life, I really think, and quantum physics speaks to this, past, present, and future are all unfolding simultaneously. It's almost like this concept of parallel universe. It's all happening at once.
Makes me think that, and again, I can't speak to the physics or the science of it, but as I was sharing.
Yeah. Okay, good.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Showbiz. Content. Meaningful content.
Sure.
But I commend you, David, on following that voice, because I know in this world of capitalism and branding, to go from that's a big move, and to follow the signs and to sort of trust in that to lead you to the right destination. I commend you for that.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And I'm trying to do the thing, because I think, you're right. With this authenticity comes a truth, and however that plays out in whatever these things are that we're supposed to do, You ever see that show Manifest?
I haven't seen that one. No.
It's like, these people were on, there's a lot of ins and outs of it. But the main thing is every episode they're following these signs. And because they were sort of in this, it's a little bit like Lost. They were in this sort of cosmic, they disappeared for 10 years on a plane.
Yeah.
But for them, it was just the blink of an eye. And then now they've returned to the world, and everyone's like, you disappeared like 10 years ago. The world moved on. But for them, they just like fell asleep on the flight.
Right.
It went through some lightning, And so it's got this kind of time travel. But the madness of this idea of like, following these signs, and where you get the signs from, and to find this authentic voice, but then also the ridiculousness of it, because, sometimes you're not in that world. Sometimes you're in the I think the Joseph Campbell quote that always comes is like, there's the, he's like, there's a disciple of the Buddha, and the Buddha's like, you're God, the elephant is God, the plant is God, the road is God, and so this disciple's like, I'm God, and he sees this elephant coming towards him, and he just thinks we're all one, and the elephant like swats him out of the way, and he's like, what the hell? And he's like, well, you're God, the elephant's God, and you got to know which world you're in, because sometimes you're like, this is not, I'm in a different domain now,
That's right. That's right. Sometimes you got to bow down before the greater power, even though it might be within you too.
Yeah. You're a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now it's your time to support. Or get out of the way and let something else happen.
Yes. I think that's a powerful realization, is get out of the way. Just like whether that's get out of the way of the creative process coming through. I mean, that's a big thing for me, is learning how to get my mind out of the way of what wants to come through when the song's coming through. Just let it come through. Be present.
Well, I mean, I think, as we engage as individuals in a creative process, as we engage as collaborators in a creative process, when to push, when to pull, when to lead, when to follow. And then as humans in this creation of Earth or in creation of society, when are we pushing for what we think should happen? When are we exhaling? Because we all are co-creators in
absolutely,
Experiment America, experiment humanity, experiment, we're part of nature. Sometimes we're fighting against it. Sometimes we're with it. You know? So
learning how to, what you said a minute ago, it's like we have to wear many hats. You're someone who's really good at teaching that through example, literally and figuratively. But knowing when to lead and when to follow, because there really is a time for letting go and letting others. And that's one thing I really appreciate about the collaborative process is I've been so used to being the front man, in a band or in a creative process, because I just have one of those personalities like, let's try this and let's do that. And then somewhere there was a shift happen where I was like, whoa, this same spark, this creative, there's a genie in everyone, a genius, and I want to see that come out of you, and like, what do you think, and what do you, and letting that come through, and then And again, you're so great at this, and you've got the experience of it in all of your musical sides, whether it's Zach Gill as a solo performer or as lead singer or one of the lead singers in ALO, and then also backing up Jack Johnson and supporting him musically. You know how to wear these different hats, and each one has its own purpose and different type of fulfillment.
Absolutely, and their own purpose, and that's perfectly put. I was thinking, because I was, I'm trying to be a good collaborator, but I'm thinking about wanting to know more about your thespian training. More about, because UCSB, like I definitely, I had, because I think the dramatic arts are a place that teaches, I think sometimes, like with music's like, that's a different lane than drama.
Sure.
And it's a different lane. But I think that truly, like, live music is a performance art.
Yeah.
And I think that I had those inclinations as a kid, and I think when you're a kid, it's like I gravitated towards musicals, and not because I particularly liked musicals or liked the jazz choir, which I did end up liking all those things, but just because they were available lanes when you're like a 15-year-old kid trying to figure out, like, I kind of want to sing and perform. Like, what do you do? Someone's like, try out for the play, try out, and I found myself in those circles and having some pretty profound experiences. I remember I was in Fiddler on the Roof, and like this panel fell down. Like I was like, it was like Tevye. Yeah. And I was like, and
Tevye, that's awesome.
I measured, I learned all these lines. I had these like 5 daughters. I did all that stuff, and I really got into it. I
could so see you as Tevye. I want to see you as Tevye now, dude. Like at this point.
I mean, I feel, to be honest, I feel like it never completely left me.
Right.
I felt like this, like, that's.
I thought you had a little Jewish in you.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, but I mean, the spirit of that character, the father.
Yeah,
I felt like I played a couple other roles that never quite. I was never like the Hercules. I was never the Romeo. But like when I suddenly was like the father trying to figure it out. Yeah, that was something that resonated deep on my core.
Right,
and it never left.
Right,
and so I remember after a night, I was forced to improvise. Like some stuff happened. Like the wheel fell off of my cart. It was like 2 weeks into this show in the high school theater, and like the cart fell off, and I was, that character talks to God a lot. So I was used to sort of and I sort of had these ways, and I remember the feeling of like improvising and the crowd knowing that I was improvising, but I didn't lose the character.
I love it.
Felt like this thing, and I remember getting off the stage and like looking up at the sky and being like, I think this is what I'm meant to do.
Wow.
I never really went back to that after that moment. It was always like, it became like music and rock and roll, and there was like it became way more music centric. So when I found out you did the BFA program, I used to see the students, like all in black, like running around the campus doing things. And I took a few classes. There was a part of me that was like, oh, that was something that I decided not to do. But there was some kind of pull to that.
Oh, cool.
Which maybe I'm even coming back to now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. Well, it's interesting because you, in a way, you got that experience, but you did it. Like when was that Fiddler on the Roof? Were you in high school?
Yeah, I was like 17.
So I never did any theater in high school.
Oh,
but I was really drawn to the performing arts in general. And I had a realization at some point in my late teens that I knew music was my calling. I knew that was my path. And I also knew I had a thick shell that I needed and wanted to break out of if I was going to live a life, have a career as a performing artist. I knew I had to overcome the critic. I had to overcome the judge, the filter. I had a filter that would, I was inhibited.
Sure.
I could feel that. And I was always, I was a pretty expressive kid, but I was also a shy kid.
Sure.
So I feel like my nature was always been a little more introverted. And I love, to this day, I value and my alone time, my solitude so much. I just, meditation and just quiet time alone is so important to me. So, but around that age, so it was my last year. I moved to Santa Barbara as a freshman in high school. Didn't know anybody in high school, starting over again. Didn't really catch on to the whole high school thing. Never felt like I belonged. I actually tested out of high school when I was 17.
Oh,
and I
wow.
went straight to City College. But in my
in
last
Santa Bar- no.
here in Santa Barbara,
Oh, okay.
yeah, here in Santa Barbara, and when I found out you could do that, there was a high school proficiency exam. It was
Wow.
an equivalent of a diploma. You could,
Yeah.
if you took this test and you passed it, then
Yeah.
you'd get your high school diploma. And so I did that. But in my last semester of high school, I took one acting class because I finally was like, well, it's time. And I remember I really enjoyed it. And then I went to City College and I was like first a film studies major or whatever.
Yeah.
But I started taking acting classes there because I was like, I really like this. Like it was scary and it was pushing me out the comfort zone. And I'm like, and I'm also
physical way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I also was not like comfortable or good with the ladies in high school or anything like that. So I'm like, but I noticed there were a lot of ladies in the drama classes and they were
Yeah.
cool and it was just a good way to interact with them and do the role playing. And so that started to catch on with me. And so long story short, when I finally did was getting ready to do my transfer to UCSB, I found out kind of last minute they had a BFA acting program that you had to audition for.
Yeah.
And they only accepted, they accept 30 students in each class, but then half of them get cut or kicked out about a year into the program. They keep the ones who they think are really serious or have really got it. And I was like, ooh, this sounds exciting, And so I remember I picked some monologues and I tried out for the BFA and I got in. And I remember when I found out about it, I knew that was what I wanted to study in college. I wanted to study performing arts, to be a performer. I didn't want to study music because I had had piano lessons for like, let's see, I had about 5 years of piano lessons as a kid, starting at 7. And then I had a couple years of guitar lessons. And I liked it. And I liked some of the, right brain training, some of the classical training. But I knew there was something intuitively that knew that if I got too much classical training, it would squash my left brain creative side. And I wanted to stay in the mystery. I liked playing by ear and learning like that. So there was something in me that was like, don't study music formally anymore. Study acting and theater. And what was so cool about that, Zach, was that like I dove into Shakespeare. I ended up getting cast on a main stage play, the lead part in Much Ado About Nothing. And Much Ado About Nothing. And I had to learn all this Shakespeare. And I remember I was really drawn to Shakespeare. There's something about the inquisitive, philosophical, spiritual side of Shakespeare that was like deep questions of life and death and who are we and what is this human condition and why do we
What a piece of work is a man.
I know, why do we create so much suffering for ourselves and for others? Like, why can't we,
and all the baggage, familial, historical.
Exactly. And then also too, to like keep our eyes on spirit, on God, on life, and like to strive to be more like the creative spirit of the universe that is the source of all things, and knowing that we're one with that just as much as we're one with the earth and all the elements of nature and all the rudimentary things, So
You should do a monologue.
yeah, to be or not to be.
Can you do it?
Well, let's see.
I could back you
The
with
only
some
the
music.
only monologue that I remember. Oh yeah, you got some music going on here.
I mean, I can
Oh,
do
man.
it here. Do you want to do it
Well, no. This will be
on the
short.
Casio?
This is-
Let me do it with the Casio. Short monologue.
Oh man, this is that's cool. Oh, that's right. You can just bring the. Talk about put on the spot. I love it. I'd love it. Well, do we need a mic on that
like
too?
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been called to do a Shakespearean monologue here. I'm going to give a little backstory. This is part of a monologue from Much Ado About Nothing, which is Benedict. I played the part of Benedict, who is the lead. Oh yeah, turn that up a little bit. It's a little quiet. But he's got the. Now this is a contemplative monologue where he's a little agitated. He's agitated because in this monologue, Benedict has lost his best friend. Not really lost his best friend, but Claudio, I think was his name, has fallen in love with a maiden, and he's like so perturbed that his best friend is all of a sudden enraptured in love, whereas they're soldiers, and they're like military men. They're not, yeah, exactly, and he's like all agitated. So Benedict goes, I do much wonder that one man
seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behaviors to love, will, after he has laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. I have known, I don't think I can remember any more than that. I think that's all I remember. I have known when he would have walked 10 miles afoot to do a good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake, pondering the realities of love. Okay, now I'm totally improvising. That's all I remember. That's it. That's all I got. That's all I got, folks.
That's amazing. Well done. That was really great.
I mean, if I had a Shakespearean book in front of me, I mean, could do a little Hamlet.
I'm just tripping because I'm like, what music should I play? And then
That was pretty good.
It was Love Fool by the Cardigans. We talked about playing that earlier, but I'm like, and I was like, Love Fool, and you're singing about the monologue was essentially about becoming a love fool.
Right? That we've all been there.
Yeah.
How they say in hindsight, it all makes perfect sense, right? Hindsight is 20/20 vision. And I look at my path with theater and acting, and it was meant to be, because I'll tell you one of the greatest things, Zach, about it was that having to memorize all those lines gave me the muscle memory to memorize thousands of songs. Like you've got that. And the same thing, you played all these parts in high school. That was when your brain was really formative. And so you remember the lyrics to so many songs.
I still remember, a fiddler on the roof sounds great. But in our little village of Anatevka, you might say that every one of us is a fiddler on the roof trying to scratch out a simple, pleasant tune without breaking his neck. Something like that.
Man, I love it, man.
But it's in there,
Can we go play some Fiddler on the Roof now?
We can try, but we should do so. Yeah, we should.
What was your favorite song to sing from that?
Well, I think my favorite song was, there was a really pretty one. It was like, it almost sounded like a Stephen Sondheim, Little Bird, Little Havale, you.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, it's right at the end, where his like third daughter leaves him for,
right.
And it's the hardest one because, the whole thing is his daughters are leaving him, and the first one marries out of choice. She chooses her childhood playmate, the poor tailor model, right. And he wants to an arranged marriage to a wealthy man, is
right.
what he wants for his daughter, so she'll be happy, so she'll be taken care of in life, and doesn't get that, but he's like, they want to marry for love, and that's a new concept. He comes from an arranged marriage, and so I think there's a love song between he and his wife called "Do You Love Me?" that's really sweet. Where they're, he's essentially like, I was an arranged.
But do you love?
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful thing. And she's like, I iron your clothes, I wash your things, I gave you like 6 kids,
right?
I clean them. She just like keeps listing all these things. But he's like, but do you love me? And then she just another list of all the things she does for him. And he's like, I know, but do you love me? And she's like, I guess I do.
Yeah,
and that's the sweetest thing. And I think it really speaks to the art of marriage in a lot of ways, the art of collaboration in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I love that song.
Well, listen, if you ever meet someone that you think would be a good partner for me, I'm totally down for the arranged marriage thing, but it doesn't have to be formally from my parents.
Looking for,
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I'm open to it.
Okay, you hear
feelers.
Hear that, everybody? Hear that, World Wide Web?
Oh, man. Let's play some music.
Yeah.
All right,
Let's do it.
This is great.
Well, here we go. Got a call from an old friend. We used to be real close. Said he couldn't go on the American way. Closed the shop, sold the house, bought a ticket to the West Coast. Now he gives them the stand-up routine in L.A. I don't need you to worry for me, 'cause I'm all said you had to offer me a second chance.
I never said you had to.
I never said I was a victim of circumstance.
I never said it.
I still belong, but don't get me wrong. Well, you can speak your mind, but not on my time. They will tell you you can't sleep alone in a strange place. Then they'll tell you you can't sleep with somebody else. I bet sooner or later you sleep in your own space. Either way, it's okay, you wake up with yourself. I never said you had to offer me a second
I
chance.
never said you had to.
I never said I was a victim of
I
circumstance.
never said it.
I still belong, but don't get me wrong. Well, you can speak your mind, but not on my time. I don't need you to worry for me, 'cause I'm alright. I don't want you to tell me it's time to come home. I don't care what you say anymore, this is my life. Go ahead with your own life, leave me alone. Keep it to yourself, it's my life. 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 Bingo. Nice.
Zach Gill's Meaningful Content Machine.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Thanks, David. Thanks for
Thank you,
doing
Zach.
this, man.
Hey, man. Dude, thanks for playing some Billy Joel.
Yeah.
One of my
yeah,
all-time
yeah.
faves.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Billy Joel, wherever you may be, for all the beautiful music.
Well, that's our first episode. I hope you liked it. Click to like and subscribe, as they say. And what did you think about it, Esperanza Valentina Stewart? Did you like it? You're so quiet. Esperanza. Well, all right. Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for watching and listening. Thanks to David Segall for being here. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Content. Meaningful content. Content. Meaningful content. Care content.